Hello and welcome to another video from Language Matters, and today we're going to be looking at Love's Philosophy by Shelley. It's a poem that features in the AQA anthology of poetry called Love and Relationships. Some of you may be doing this one, some of you may of course be doing the conflict anthology. As I said before, this works best if you have a copy of this poem and a pencil and you annotate it as we go through it. Also, I'd urge you to subscribe, please, and click the bell so you don't miss any other uploads regarding poetry, prose, plays and things like that you'll be studying. As I said, this poem is called Love's Philosophy by Shelley, and I think philosophy here is meant in the form of an argument rather than sort of abstract thinking. It's meant in the form of an argument, and it takes the form of a kind of a playful argument between him and the object of his affections, arguing for a union between them. It relies heavily on natural imagery, as we would expect from romantic poetry, but also uses a strong rhyme scheme which resonates with the reader. And if we think about sort of the form and structure, and remember you're marked on your being able to comment upon form and structure, not necessarily just labelling these things, but stating what you think the overall effect is, how it affects you as a reader. So for example, the poem is written in a sort of trochaic meter, that's T-R-O-C-H-A-I-C, meter, and the effect of that is that it gives the poem a very heavy, sort of dreamy feel to it. He also uses a kind of an analectic syllable. That just means like kind of an extra syllable on the end of some of the lines. Now this is supposed to give the poem a spontaneous feel, when it's actually anything but. It's actually a piece of poetry is very contrived, written in accordance to metre and form. But it is supposed to give it more of a spontaneous sort of feel to it. It has two stanzas, alternately rhymed quatrains, and this poem, as a lot of romantic poetry does, it has a strong relationship with the archetypal ballad. And the archetypal balladic metre, often used by the romantic poets. You've got to remember the romantic poets favoured sort of the forms of sort of traditional songs and traditional ballads. Romanticism in many ways was a rejection of the sort of classical forms used by the poets that preceded them, poets like Alexander Pope and Dryden, for example. So they liked sort of ballads and songs. And when you talk about romantic and you're thinking about the cultural movement of romanticism, you need to use a capital R, please, to distinguish it from romantic, meaning sort of love and hearts and things like that. So we're talking about the romantic movement and sort of romantic forms. Also, in terms of your context mark, you would argue that the strong emphasis on sort of personal feelings and sort of natural imagery is a trait of sort of the romantic poets. Of course, William Wordsworth, one of the first generation romantics, said poetry should be a spontaneous overflowing of powerful feelings, and that's exactly what we have here. And in fact, we do get a lot of emphasis on personal emotions combined with a kind of a natural symmetry, which gives a whole idea of sort of lovers' union being something that is almost universal and divine almost, which is, I suppose, the idea. It's interesting that both stanzas end with rhetorical questions. The rhetorical questions, of course, warrant a response, at least in terms of making you think about something. And also the two rhetorical questions are actually monosyllabic, if thou kiss not me. It's quite interesting that he does this, because the monosyllabic nature of the last lines sets them apart from the lines that precede them, but it also makes them stand out more. So this is interesting stuff in terms of structure and form. If we think more about the poem as well, in some respects you get words like fountains, ocean he uses, but he doesn't use any adjectives. Again, these words are meant to stand out as quite powerful, so he has them completely free of any descriptive clutter. So if we think about the read through the poem itself, you'll have to excuse some of the notes I've already made. The fountains mingle with the river. beautiful image of sort of flowing water, and the emphasis is to show how everything is connected. And the personification here is interesting because it draws parallels between the natural world and human agents and human relationships. And the rivers with the ocean. There's a lot of repetition which gives it an almost sort of flowing sing-song quality to it. And the rivers with the ocean, and the winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. Interesting, river and forever is like a half rhyme, as is heaven and forgiven in the second stanza. Now half rhymes are interesting. I've said before in the Wilfred Owen poem that half rhymes are not as satisfying as full rhymes, and it links thematically with this poem because half rhymes has a jarring quality, that the couple aren't united, that there's a lack of sort of, well, satisfaction, if you like. And the winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single, all things by law divine. Now it's interesting that he's saying that that their relationship is just natural, almost like naturally and heavenly divined, really, in many respects. But Shelley, of course, was an atheist. He was expelled from Oxford University for publishing a pamphlet on the necessity of atheism. All things by law divine, and another's being mingle. I like the fact that there's a repetition here of mingle. He mentions again in the first line, and mingle, that sort of repetition, emphasising the importance on the theme of the poem. Also, mingle is rhymed with single, which is quite an interesting juxtaposition of two ideas, single and mingle, coming together. And then we get that wonderful why not I with thine, that monosyllabic structure of the line, the syllables. See the mountains kiss high heaven, and the waves clasp one another. Again, there's this sort of language, this very tactile, almost physical language, I think reveals a degree of frustration. Also, the sibilant S sound could almost recreate the sound of the winds and the waves and things like that. So there's you could argue that he's trying to do that as well. See the mountains kiss high heaven, and the waves clasp one another. No sister flower would be forgiven if it disdained its brother. And he talks about these relationship being almost sister and brothers, being fraternal, childlike, innocent, really, but natural as well. The emphasis on natural, and that to disdained, if it disdained, that word is quite jarring and stands out as if it is unnatural and doesn't really belong in this context. And the sunlight clasps, again, that word again, clasp, kiss, is a lot of repetition going on here with words that sort of recreate sounds of the natural environment. Disdained its brother, and the sunlight clasps the earth. So it's almost now that the idea of mingling or coming together is going beyond just the relationship of these two people. It's almost broadening out on a sort of universal, a cosmic feel, really, if you're looking down onto the planet Earth. So how almost like God-given or divine, really, although, as I said, Shelley was an atheist. And the sunlight clasps the sea, and the moonbeams kiss the sea. What is all this sweet work worth, if thou kiss not me? And you get that again, that last line, that really does stand out due to the fact that it's, compared to the other lines, it's very plain and monosyllabic. Also with the last stanza, he's generally questioning what is the point of the world if she doesn't love him, if they don't come together. What is the point? Because surely everything gravitates around this, is what he seems to be saying with this poem. From the planets, the heavens, the seas, the mountains, all this sort of very prominent sort of natural description. Anyway, this is a fairly short poem. I think I've said as much as I really can say about it in terms of its context, its meaning, and the sort of techniques he uses. Please do check out my other videos. Click like and subscribe, and do keep watching.